Welcome back. So in this video I'm going to be covering the for loop, and here's a small program to demonstrate how the for loop is going to be executed. So as you can see, I have defined a variable called sum, and there's a for loop here. So let me quickly give you an overview of the for loop, the structure of the for loop. So every for loop has an initializer, and as you can see, this is where the initialization happens. So we are declaring a variable called num, and we define it to have a value of 0, and after that there's a conditional check. So that's the second part of the for loop, where every time this for loop runs, the variable that we define here is going to be checked against this condition. So here num is checked whether it's less than 10, and then the third part of the for loop header is of course where you write an expression which increments the value of this control variable. So the for loop starts with initializing it, and this initialization happens just once. Next, this condition is checked. So initially we have a value of 0 for num, and then obviously 0 is less than 10, so you come inside here, you come within the body of the for loop, and these statements will execute. Once the last statement in the for loop has been executed, what happens next is that this variable would get incremented, right? And once it gets incremented, this conditional check would be carried out, and if the condition is true, then once again the for loop's body executes. So the execution continues until this particular condition becomes false or returns false. Okay, so until this expression returns false. Once it returns false, you would be able to exit out of the for loop, and after that the statements after the for loop execute. So let's quickly execute this program and then see how the execution goes. So as you can see, I've set two breakpoints. So let's trace through the code, debug the code. Okay, so as let me add num here as well, so that we can see the, as you can see here, num has an initial has been not been initialized, so it just takes some chunk, and as soon as we enter the for loop, you can see that num's been initialized to 0. If you look at the watch window here, and sum has a value of 0 as well, so sum is defined outside the for loop. And let's see what happens. The value of num is obviously going to be let me take that breakpoint out, and num is still 0, sum is 0. Now sum obviously takes the value 0, because the very first time num has a value 0 and sum has a value 0. So 0 plus 0 into 2 is 0, and that's what we see here in the watch window. And you should be able to let's check the console output later. So now let's execute the loop again, and as you can see down here in the watch window, num is incremented to a value of 1. So that means this expression has executed, and the check has also succeeded, because we can see control coming into the body of the coming down to the body of the for loop. So let's continue the execution, and as you can see now, sum has incremented to a value of 2. So that shows us that our num variable has actually been used in this equation. So num has a value of 1, so 1 into 2 is 2, and 2 plus the earlier value of sum was 0, so we get a value of 2 for sum. So let's execute it one more time, and yes, the condition is once again true. So num has a value of 2 now, it's been incremented to 2. Okay, so 2 into 2 is 4, and the earlier value of sum is 2, so we are now going to see sum getting incremented to 6. So this continues until the value of num exceeds 10. So as we can just keep a look on the watch window here, and so num keeps executing, the for loop body keeps executing until, alright, So now we see num has, if you look at the watch window, num has reached a value of 9. So what happens next? 9 is going to become 10, and 10 is definitely not less than 10. So that's what happens. Control comes down to the statement outside the for loop, and that's done. All right, so let's look at our console output. So as you can see, the console output is, yeah, the value of num is initially 0 and the intermediate value of sum is 0, and so it goes. So pretty much the same values that we saw in the watch window is what's getting printed out here. And there's one other small thing I wanted to let you guys know. So as you can see here, this variable has been defined and declared and defined only within the body of the only within the for loop. So the scope of num is only within the body of the for loop. All right, so how do we prove this? Let me quickly exit. Right, as you can see here, let me just uncomment this statement, and immediately the IDE flags an error, which is the identifier num is undefined. That's because this variable num is visible only within the for loop, and we have declared it within the header of the for loop. So that's the reason it will not be able to you won't be able to execute this statement because it's not visible outside the for loop. All right, so what do you do if you want it to be visible outside the for loop? Yeah, so just maybe move the declaration outside, and yeah, so it's not necessary that the initializer has to start the value 0. You can start it at 1, you can start it at 5. So now if you see, the IDE has not flagged an error. So let's run this program now and see what sort of output we get. Okay, so num initially has value 0. So now we enter the body of the we enter the header of the for loop. So as you can see in the watch window, num has got the value 5, and that's how it's going to execute the body. So we are now going to see fewer iterations of the body of the for loop, because it's going to reach 10 much quicker. Boom, and it's out. So as you can see, now the value of num is accessible even outside the for loop. That's because the scope now extends even beyond the lifetime of the for loop. Alright, so this is a quick and easy introduction to the for loop, and I'll leave it to you guys to explore the for loop further. Thank you.